And after your presentation, our Dr. Prachi will take the questions and read it to you. You can respond to that.
Then I will on the sound.
Yeah, that time you can, yes.
Okay.
Dr. Prachi, I think we can start.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So, good evening, doctors. A warm welcome on behalf of Shell Healthcare, and thank you for joining this webinar. So, first we have a short video, and follow that we will begin with our talk. Thank you. So, Chitra, over to you. Thank you, Chitra. Thank you for that video. So today our topic of discussion is endometriosis and infertility. We have eminent speaker, Dr. Faizi Louis. Sir needs no introduction, and he is a senior consultant and associate professor from Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Kochi. Sir is elected FOXI Vice President 2021. He is also Secretary of ISAR Kerala Charter, and from 2013 to 2015, Sir was Chairperson of All India FOXI International Academic Exchange Committee. So with this, may I request Sir and invite him for his talk on endometriosis and infertility. Thank you. Over to you, Sir.
Okay. Thanks for that introduction. My topic today is one second. Okay, my topic today is in endometriosis and infertility. Without wasting time, I will go. This is a short presentation about infertility and endometriosis. Both infertility and endometriosis, both are vast topics. I think but I'll be confirming my half an hour talk about endometriosis and related infertility together when it comes what we will do. So before starting, we must know what endometriosis is. It is the medical definition is it is the endometrium including both endometrial glands and stroma in an ectopic location. The word literally means endo, within, metri, uterus, oasis means condition. Within uterus condition occurring outside the body is known as endometriosis. So it actively functioning endometrial tissues and glands is found outside the uterus. It is commonly found in uterus acrals, surface of the ovary, and leading to endometrioma, fallopian tubes, and the rectovaginal septum, peritoneal surface of the uterus, and all. And if you look into the brief history, it was first reported in 1860 by Rokitansky, though in initial part it was thought to be a disease of upper class and white women. But what are theories which can produce endometriosis? As gynecologists, we will be studying right from the MBBS time onwards. So one of the theories is the retrograde theory, that is caused by implantation of the endometrial cells by the retrograde transtubal regurgitation during menstruation. This explains the pelvic endometriosis. Next is the lymphatic theory, that is through the lymphatic channels of the uterus. Then next is the direct implantation theory, where it starts to grow in a susceptible individuals if implanted to a new sites. A good example is the scar endometriosis. Next is the coelomic metaplasia, that is metaplasmy of the coelomic epithelium into endometrial tissue. This explains endometriosis of the rectovaginal septum. But in infertility, why does infertility is being caused by the endometriosis? Basically, it is due to distorted pelvic anatomy, causing tubal occlusion, disorder of the follicular growth and ovarian dysfunction, endometrial receptivity is decreased. There are a lot of papers explaining that. And increased prostaglandins, which can affect the tubal motility, follicular genesis, and corpus luteal function, and the alteration in the peritoneal fluid and inflammatory cytokines, and abnormal systemic immune response. These all are all the causes of endometriosis. Also, indirectly, dyspareunia can also be the cause of endometriosis, leading to infertility. So what are the stages of endometriosis? There are different types of classification. One is first stage, second, third, fourth. The other is minimal, mild, moderate, and severe. Minimal disease is small amounts of brownish red tissue, black, white, different types of endometrial implants, as we are known, we have studied in or we have seen in different test books. It's a mild disease is deeper, more numerous than the stage 1, slightly deeper than or more numerous. And the moderate is the disease may be deep implants, small endometrium on ovaries and other preeclampsia adhesions. And fourth is severe disease, may be deep implants and dense adhesion, or the large endometrium on ovaries, rectum, and may adhere to the uterine surface. So I'll come to that in detail as we progress in the presentation. So how does that affect the infertility? Minimal and mild, not clearly established as role in infertility. Moderate and severe disease, role of infertility is definitely established, and definitely we have to go for a intervention is needed in those cases. So what are the treatment to moderate to severe endometriosis? We can go for medical management, we can go for surgical management, or go for a ART, assisted reproductive techniques in those patients. So medical management, people have been using NSAIDs to reduce the pain, progesterone only pill because that inhibits the estrogen-induced mitosis and alters estrogen receptors and inhibits the growth of endometriotic implants. That is the progesterone only pill or combined OC pills, or GnRH agonists, where the chronic administration lead to down regulation of the P2-3, the suppression of the hypothalamus P2-3 ovarian axis, leading to anovulation. But that will lead to decreased ovulation or inhibiting ovulation also. So while all these medical managements insemination will only delay the attempts of conception. I'm talking about infertility with endometriosis with infertility. And this is one of the Cochrane review came in 2007, where they analyzed 56 potential studies and 25 studies were included. So they the summary was comparing ovulation suppression versus placebo for endometriosis reports no evidence or benefit on pregnancy outcome. That is when endometriosis with infertility. This is another report came in fertility sterility in 2012. That is endometriosis and infertility committee opinion about the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. Whereas medical therapy is effective for relieving pain associated with endometriosis, but there is no evidence that medical treatment of endometriosis improves fertility. It actually, fertility is essentially eliminated during the treatment because all medical treatments of endometriosis inhibit ovulation. But there are some indications, I will come to that. And this is another Cochrane review tells that the aim of medical therapy is to switch off the ovarian function. Their role in infertility treatment has been reviewed in Cochrane systematic review, which has concluded that there is no evidence to support their use in women with endometriosis who wish to conceive. So next, our aim must be for the surgical treatment of endometriosis. So it removes the endometrioma by the aspiration of the cyst, and endometrial implants we have to when we do the surgical treatment we can remove it, and removal of the adhesions, that means tubal or ovarian anatomy is restored by removing the adhesions, and removal of deep rectovaginal selective sigmoid endometriomas, which can relieve the symptoms and the recurrence of that. So in infertility, the surgery must be aiming for the curative, that is to correct the endometriosis. Also, it has to be conservative in some cases, especially in patients with going for assisted reproductive techniques like to correct the hydrosalpinx, correct the cyst reduction, and correct the pelvic collection, which can affect in the ovum pickup in those patients. So what are the types of surgery we can give? One is laparotomy, other is laparoscopy, which is the gold standard in infertility. Why the laparoscopy is considered as the gold standard is because it is not only the diagnosis, but we can go for the treatment of the endometriosis. We can remove the adhesions caused by the disease. And laparoscopy, better visualization is there compared to the laparotomy. And smaller incision, speeder post-operative recovery, and less post-operative adhesions, and results are equivalent or better than the laparotomy because of the vision is better. And laparotomy has to be done in some cases where it is in advanced cases where dense pelvic adhesion with involvement of ureter, bowel, and uterine vessels, and for those in whom fertility conservation is not necessary. The aim of the surgery is to restore the normal anatomy by removing the endometrioma, removing the implants, and adhesiolisis by dissection, cutting, and cauterization, and electric cautery or laser. Complete hemostasis should be attained at the time of surgery. That is another thing what we are aiming during the aim of the surgery. And at the end of the surgery, we must leave minimal dead tissue or minimal raw area, and all the possible methods to prevent adhesion, that is reef adhesion formation, has to be followed. And the risk of the surgery is there is any surgeries, there is risk, especially in endometriosis surgery. There is always a risk of injury to the tubes and ovary, injury to the vital organs, bleeding, and infection and fibrosis can there. And more importantly, if there is a chance of re-adhesion formation, that will be more severe, and the plane of cleavage will be difficult in the if the adhesions reform after one surgery. So next thing we have to be careful is the damage to the ovary. There is direct injury of the ovary or the follicle while removing the cyst or cauterization. That is the thing we have to be very careful with. If you over enthusiastically, if you tackle the endometriosis, it can lead to the damage to the ovary and the follicle, where that is the reserve for the follicles in the infertility patients. and injury can occur due to affecting the blood supply to the ovary. Basically, we cauterize more on the infundibulopelvic ligament, and the ovarian ligament can lead to impairment of the ovarian function, and total loss of ovarian reserve can be there. And peritoneal endometriosis, we can use coagulation, unipolar or bipolar or electrosurgical instruments we can use. Vaporization by the laser can be there. I have no experience with that, only in the theoretical this thing. I think not much centers in India are using laser now because it is very expensive. But it is promising because we can control the thermal damage as we see in the workshops abroad. But in India, very few centers, as far as my knowledge, is using laser for endometriosis at present. So coming to mild endometriosis, as you can see, this case has mild endometriosis lesion. We can coagulate it using bipolar. Bipolar, the current travels from one electrode to another, and so the damage or the spread of the current is, we can be limited to that. Whether it is black endometriotic spots or blebs can be using the cautery. The only thing is that whether this mild or minimal endometriosis is the reason positive for the endometriosis is doubtful. But in infertility patients, if you do the laparoscopy and if you find it is better to do that so that the disease progression will be less, and especially below, above the uterosacral ligament, we can safely use that so that it will not lead to the further progression of the disease even in the mild endometriosis. There may be underlying deep lesions, but like these patients where no other addition is there, it is not advisable to go for infertile patients to go for a deep endometriosis excision in those patients. And the principle of endometriosis surgery is adducelasis and restore the tubo-ovarian anatomy as far as possible in the first sitting itself, because as we discussed in the re-addition formation, it can lead to severe additions and the plane of cleavage will be difficult. So in this case, you can see the tubes and ovaries are adherent to the ovarian fossa and the posterior surface of the uterus. So the best is to use a combined cautery and sharp dissection, where you go for a action counter traction by which we try to restore the anatomy as far as possible, and clearance of the pouch of Douglas as far as possible without damaging the adjacent vital bowel structures or without much affecting the vascularity of the ovary. But in those cases, it is always better to use, I always prefer to use a combination of the bipolar and the sharp dissection. We can see some areas we can use the sharp dissection. And the primary surgery is most important, where we can get the best plane. And at the end of the surgery, we must wash thoroughly, wash extensively using saline, and the bleeding points has to be cauterized, so that re-addition formation is less as far as possible. That is the most important. You can see the tubo-ovarian anatomy is restored, and bipolar cautery is used so that the bleeding points and raw area is minimized as far as possible. So if you use the bipolar, the current travels between both the electrodes only. And extensively we have to use the saline and to do the to find out the exact point of bleeding, also to remove the dead and charred tissue, so that the re-addition formation, post-addition formation is minimum as far as possible. I am fast forwarding the video. At the end of the surgery, we can see we must wash properly and restore the anatomy as far as possible. So how do you do this restoration of the anatomy? Usually I use a uterine manipulator which has a blunt tip, so that when you introduce into the uterine cavity and open it, the chance of perforation is less, and you can do a proper angulation as far as possible. You can see how easily it is to we can get the action counter. You can see that when you use the manipulator, use the anti-version, you can get the good view of the pouch of Douglas and good head-low position. Then we have to do the dyslysis using blunt and sharp dissection and use the bipolar to restore the normal anatomy. You can see, unless you use a good uterine manipulator which is atraumatic, the chance of advisualizing is and to restore the pouch of Douglas is not easy, especially in infertility. Clearance of the normal anatomy and clearance of the pouch of Douglas is very important in those cases. So coming to endometrioma, it occurs as a result of deposits on the surface of the ovary, which cause invagination of the cortex with adhesions over the surface, which then result in encapsulated cyst. This is one older classification of endometrioma, came long back. It has been classified as mild, moderate, and severe. Mild, minimal lesions on the ovarian surface, and moderate, severe surface lesion on one or both ovaries with scarring and retraction of or small endometrioma with minimal peri-ovarian adhesion. Severe involvement of one or both ovaries with endometrioma more than 2 centimeters. So endometrioma, basically we have to drain the endometrioma, we have to excise the cyst wall, and coagulation with bipolar electrosurgical, that is most ideally recommended. So superficial ovarian lesions can be vaporized. In ovarian endometrioma less than 3 centimeters can be aspirated, irrigated after inspection of the cyst lesion has to be lesion, and cyst wall can be nucleated. And if it is endometrium is more than 3 centimeters, should be aspirated following the incision of the cyst and removal of the cyst wall from the ovarian cortex to prevent recurrence has to be done. So based on the current evidence, ovarian cystectomy appears to the method of choice in ovarian endometrioma. You can see in this case, in the endometriotic cyst, you make an incision on the and away from the hilus of the endometrioma, so that doesn't affect too much of the vascularity, and we aspirate the cystic fluid and make a initial incision must be little long, so that damage while cyst wall enucleation is less. And while cyst wall enucleation, try to use the non-toothed instrument on the normal ovarian tissue, so that the bleeding and need of cauterization is less on the normal ovarian tissue. And when you do the cyst wall enucleation, at one point the cyst wall may be densely adherent to the normal ovarian tissue. At that point, we must not be too adamant in trying to do the total enucleation, because that may damage the normal ovarian tissue. So our aim must be to do the enucleation of the cyst wall, but try to not less damage the normal ovarian tissue as far as possible. That is the most important thing what we have to follow. So you must not rush to that. You must take your own time and do it. Sometimes I normally always doesn't do that, but in rare cases we can use just like vasopressin, we can inject into the cyst wall, so that by the time you do the cyst wall enucleation, the bleeding is much lesser. It can be done the initial stage, or if it is a big cyst wall, we can do that. But sometimes if the vasopressin goes into the wrong plane, the cyst wall enucleation may become problematic. Otherwise, if you do properly, that is okay. So after the enucleation of the cyst wall, we have to wash thoroughly the ovarian surface with saline, and then only the bleeding points has to be cauterized. That is very important. Otherwise, unnecessarily, if you use too much cautery, that will affect the ovarian follicles and the future ovarian function. And if you just hold for the ovarian tissue together for some time, most of the time bleeding stops. Only those small points has to be cauterized. And as far as possible, the ovarian, if there is adhesions, you must use less cautery towards the ovarian vasculature as far as possible. And always wash properly, remove the charred tissue, so the chance of re-adhesion formation is less. And people have tried all sort of Intercede, all sort of things, but nothing has been found to be very much foolproof in preventing the re-adhesion formation. But if hemostasis is totally achieved, we can use Indraseed. But if there is some oozing remaining and Indraseed is not very effective, people have tried a lot of other things. You can see in the literature, people have put saline in the pouch of Douglas for few ml of saline so that the adhesion formation is found to be less. But I just put this clip to show that this another clip. If there is a big cyst, I just try to make a bipolar incision through that, insert a suction directly through the lateral port and aspirate it, and then do the enucleation so that the huge endometriotic cyst leakage of the endometriotic fluid will be less, so you need less need to do the suction irrigation after that. And this is another case with bilateral endometriosis. If it is a bilateral endometriosis in infertility patient, definitely we have to see the ovarian reserve in those patients. It was not there when about 20 years back when we started the infertility practice. Now IMH is widely available with compared to the few years back. Now it is relatively good reliability of the IMH result is there. But if the ovarian reserve is less, bilateral endometrioma, we must be very careful. If you can retrieve few oocytes, then don't go for any surgery, directly go for IVF. But if we cannot retrieve few oocytes, we can see by doing the transvaginal sonograph. In those cases, after GnRH suppression, we can just drain the cyst and come out under suppression and proceed to the prolonged suppression and go for IVF. Otherwise, if our reserve is good, we can, and young patients, especially if the ovarian function is good, we can go for a cyst wall enucleation. Otherwise, we must be very careful, especially in bilateral endometrioma. And if the ovarian reserve is less, we have to be very careful in heroically doing the bilateral cystectomy in those patients, because that will affect the ovarian function and our future fertility in infertility patients. I am particularly telling about infertility patient with bilateral endometrioma, or even if this one ovary, if we can retrieve oocytes and the ovarian result is function is compromised, or older patient, then if you are going for ART procedure, no need to intervene those patients to tackle the endometrioma in those patients. Otherwise, young patient, as we saw in the first clip of endometrioma, definitely we have to go for a endometriotic cyst wall aspiration and enucleation to those patients. But we must be careful when we are using cautery in the ovarian fossa, trying to release ovarian adhesion. We must be very careful. Urethra is lying in the ovarian fossa. When you use the cautery, we must be very careful. And also cauterizing the infundibulopelvic ligament and ovarian ligament, we must be very careful in using the even the bipolar cautery. We must be very careful. So ovarian, urethra goes to the ovarian fossa, so we must be very careful. When you use a uterine manipulator, it will be very easy to have to restore the to the anatomy and to do the deselysis. It will be very easy if you use a automatic uterine manipulator, as I have shown. And even if the anterior surface lesions is there, in the same sitting, we must be if possible, we must cauterize it in the first sitting itself. So the precaution must be complete deselysis by the laparoscopy must be the aim, and complete hemostasis must be done at the end of the surgery. And methods to prevent adhesion can be done by preventing the, at the end there must not be oozing, and we can try Indraseed or whatever methods available. And careful use of energy devices near the ovarian ligament and infundibulopelvic ligament and ovarian tissue must be done. So aim of curative surgery to restore the anatomy, to remove the endometrioma, to destroy or remove the endometrial implants and nodules, and adhesiolisis. And surgery should be attempted only if the couple can stay together immediately after the surgery. Suppose if the husband is working abroad or husband is working away, like in military or armed forces, and if they come for a leave, if you do the surgery, after 1 month, if the husband goes, there is no use, because however you do the adhesiolisis, it can reform after 8 to 12 months. So the couple must be together, able to be trying for pregnancy together after at least minimum of 6 months after the surgery. Then only we must attempt surgery in endometriotic suspected patients. And usually we can suspect an adhesions by doing the sliding staining, the transvaginal sonography, when you try to move the ovary from above and while doing the transvaginal sonography in those patients. And if there are other signs and symptoms are there or endometrioma is there, you must plan the surgery accordingly in infertile patients. And also, before going for endometrial surgery, correct associated infertility problems like male factor has to be corrected before doing so. So after the conservative treatment in infertile women, a choice between expected management and active treatment must be considered. For this, we have to see the age of the patient, the surgical results, how far we can and restore the normal anatomy, and what are the results after the end of the surgery, and influence and severity of any other infertile factor in those patients. So highest pregnancy rate is there in the first year following success rate by 1.6%. Success rate after surgery in control studies in different grades is 19 to 20%. And this is one study comparing how far the pregnancy rate, clinical cumulative pregnancy rate after minimal surgery, minimal endometriosis and severe endometriosis there. And most of the studies is telling there is definitely a role in minimal endometriosis. And this one study came in 2002 tells that it is compared to severe, there is statistically significant difference in pregnancy rate also. So the pregnancy rate, when we compare stage 1 and 2, this is one 2007 study, and 89% in stage 1 and 2 endometriosis, 56% in grade 3 and 4 surgery. And spontaneous pregnancy may be attempted for 8 to 12 months before inducing pregnancy in stage 1 and 2 endometriosis, and for 6 to 8 months in case of stage 3 and 4 endometriosis surgery, if you can properly do the surgery. What is the role of medical treatment in post-operative period? When the primary objective of surgical treatment is relief from pain and pregnancy is not an immediate goal, post-operative medical treatment may have a value, particularly when extensive disease or residual disease is there. Otherwise, there basically no role is there, except if you are going for an ART, that is IVF4HC. This is the Cochrane data, 2010. And they analyzed GnRH agonists were used to downregulate the HPO axis for 3 months or more in IVF4HC patients. The clinical pregnancy rate per woman was higher in women receiving GnRH agonists when compared to the control group, and the live birth rate also was higher in the woman receiving GnRH agonists. So the conclusion was administration of GnRH agonists for a period of 3 to 6 months versus increases odds of clinical pregnancy by 4-fold. So that is the role of medical management in post-operative period. So coming to one more point about the staging of endometriosis. You know the different stages of endometriosis, and this is the American Fertility Society revised classification. They give according to lesion size, according to the peritoneal involvement, and if the pouch of Douglas is completely obliterated, it is 40 points. 40 points with that. And the problem with the revised classification is that it is in the severe, it is grade if it is more than 40. That means if the pouch of Douglas is obliterated, it is straight away stage 4. But the tubes and ovaries may be free. That is one the problem. That is the limitation of AFS staging is it has got relatively poor correlation with pregnancy rate. So this has been corrected by the Endometriotic Fertility Index, which has been first postulated by David Adamson in 2010. We have done study also, and it is found to be correlating also. So what they describe is how you assess the least functional potential of the tube, fimbriae, and ovary at the end of the surgery. So at the end of the surgery, we give a least functional score at the conclusion of the surgery. So if it is you are seeing normally, it is 4, and if it is absent or non-functional, it is 0. And then you give the score to each side, left side and right side, allocate to is known as least function score. And this least function score is added to the AFS endometriosis score, and age, years of infertility and prior pregnancy, and the EFI endometriotic fertility index is given. And if the score is high, definitely the chance of pregnancy, even if you wait for three years, is good. That means if the score is high 9 to 10, by 3 years you can get a pregnancy rate of nearly 75%, and 1 year 56%. And if score is 0 to 3, at the end of 1 year it is 10%, and by 3 years also it is same 10%. So the similar data we got when we conducted in our population also a few years back. So what is the role of second surgery after first surgery? Again, the patient has got recurrence of endometriosis, especially in this era of IVF. And most of the studies tell that IVF is preferred than the second surgery. And there is no role for repeat surgery in IVF. And this is one study telling that IVF gives a 25 to 35% of pregnancy. And the second surgery, the chance of ovarian failure is increases with the surgery. This is another study came as repeat surgery versus IVF cumulative pregnancy rate is 70 with 2 IVF cycle, especially, and compared to 24% with the surgery, especially in this era where we can freeze the embryos and do it in the subsequent cycle. Each cycle we can get a fairly good pregnancy. So compared to the first surgery, especially if the ovarian function is impaired, there is no much role for repeat surgery in patients with endometriosis, with infertility, with the intercurrence patients. So next thing is that, as we told about the supportive therapy or the curative therapy in patients with associated lesions like hydrosalpinx. Why this hydrosalpinx is we are worried in patients with infertility is that the hydrosalpinx fluid is embryotoxic. It can impair the implantation and endometrial receptivity because it decreases the integrin and factor in that, and also it can lead to mechanical effect of washout about the embryos, and also it can lead to altered or increased uterine activities by uterine contraction can be precipitated by the fundus to the cervix that can affect the implantation in the patients with hydrosalpinx. So if there is a hydrosalpinx detectable by the ultrasound in the patient, infertile patients, even if they are going for infertility, we have to go for a surgery in those patients. And if it is hydrosalpinx is just due to fimbrial adhesion, we can just remove the adhesions and relieve the hydrosalpinx. Otherwise, what we can do is that we can go for vaginal aspiration and antibiotic vaginal aspiration transvaginal graded before starting the ovarian stimulation. Definitely it is going to recollect again. That is the main problem with vaginal aspiration with antibiotics. By the time we aspirate before the stimulation, by the time you do the embryo transfer, it can reform. But if we accidentally detect it, which is not there initially before starting stimulation, sometimes post-menstrually, if the fluid collect, it can be ultrasound detectable at the end of the stimulation. Those cases, after the oocyte pickup, we can freeze the embryos and transfer in subsequent cycle after correcting the hydrosalpinx, or we can aspirate it, but it most probably can reform after a few days. That is what we are seeing in our practice. Otherwise, we can go for a salpingostomy. When we do for salpingostomy, you make a big incision on the antemesenteric border, but it can be done in younger patients. But if you are not going for an ART procedure, chance of subsequent pregnancy is there, but there is increased ectopic pregnancy chances there. Also here also it can reform in those patients. So next thing most commonly advised is to go for a salpingectomy. There is a big hydrosalpinx. We can go for a salpingectomy, but in severely damaged hydrosalpinx in difficult pelvic adhesions, it is going to definitely affect the ovarian vasculature. This picture is a hydrosalpinx first. This is a ectopic pregnancy. I just put that to show that when you do the salpingectomy, we have to use the artery as nearer to the tube as far as possible, so that the vascularity is not affected, even if you are going for any tubal surgery in infertile patients. But what else can we do if we are in infertile patient if there is hydrosalpinx? We can go for a proximal tubal ligation, proximal tubal clipping. That means if you have densely damaged tube with dense adhesions, or in a patients with altered or diminished ovarian function, we can do the proximal tubal coagulation of the tube, and we can just use disconnect the hydrosalpinx with the with the uterine cavity, so that the toxic effect of the hydrosalpinx fluid to the uterine cavity is less as far as possible. As this is especially indicated in patients with severe pelvic adhesions, raised FSH value, low ovarian reserve. So what routinely what we have to see is that this study came in 2006. It tells that in when you do the salpingectomy, FSH and A2 is increased post salpingectomy. Number of good follicles is less with stimulation in salpingectomy patients. D2 level also less compared to the proximal tubal ligation than salpingectomy. And oocyte collected also is less. But if you can get good oocyte, the pregnancy rate is less, is similar compared to proximal tubal ligation in salpingectomy and proximal tubal ligation patient. What I prefer to do is that in those patients with the huge hydrosalpinx, where it is surrounding or nearing the ovary, if you are going for IVF, we do the proximal tubal ligation and go for a linear salpingostomy, so that this hydrosalpinx, if you during ovum pickup, if your needle goes through the hydrosalpinx, that infected fluid can contaminate the oocyte what you are collected, and it can affect the oocyte quality and the embryo quality. But next thing we have to be careful is that if you see a hydrosalpinx in the scan in a patient with previous surgery, if you are not sure whether it has got connection to the uterine cavity, we can go for a saline sonus salpingograph and see whether the fluid what you are pushing into the uterine cavity, whether goes into the ultrasound detectable hydrosalpinx. If it is not connecting into the hydrosalpinx, we need not have to tackle that. If it is connecting to the hydrosalpinx, definitely we have to go for the laparoscopy and clip the proximal part of the tube. If it is a huge hydrosalpinx, we can go for a linear salpingostomy, and so that even if it is reconnected, the chance of hydrosalpinx fluid getting infected into the our oocyte collected will be less in those patients. Especially in this patient, you can see there is a tube and ovary is becoming a tube ovarian mass after the repeated surgery. So we did the salpingectomy, proximal to instead of salpingectomy, we went for a proximal tubal ligation and went for a linear salpingostomy, so that the hydrosalpinx is reduced, so we can plan IVF and oocyte pickup in those patients. So to summarize, in infertility with endometriosis, we have to go for an ovarian reserve assessment, and if it is less, we have to go for an IVF at the earliest, and we have to also see the semen analysis and assessment of the if the semen analysis and ovarian reserve is good, we can go for an assessment of the fallopian tubes. And IVF, if natural conception is not possible, otherwise we can, in the surgery, we have to tackle the dysolysis as we described, and allow for 6 to 12 months for spontaneous pregnancy. In that period, we can go for ovulation reduction and try to increase the chance by doing the IUI in those patients if there is associated borderline male factors there. Otherwise, if there is a hydrosalpinx or large endometrioma, we have to tackle that. Otherwise, we directly go for an IVF. We can go for ovarian suppression with JNRH analogs for 3 months minimum and go for IVF. Now, another concept which is picking up is that in those patients with the coming of an antagonist protocol, we can go for an ovum pickup in those patients and freeze the embryos in those patients, and then go for a prolonged suppression before transferring the number of embryos in this patient. Because for that we must have a good cryopreservation success rate in your center. Not only that, there you must be able to get reasonably good number of embryos to freeze in those patients. Those patients we can go for that. Next thing is that if there is a small hydrosalpinx, we can, then those patients also we can go for a ovum pickup, collect the embryos after 1 or 2 ovum pickup and collect the pooled embryos and collect that, and they go for the hydrosalpinx correction or go for prolonged suppression before going for a embryo transfer in those patients. So to conclude, there is no role for medical management in infertility associated with endometriosis except before ART. Laparoscopic preferred method of surgery. Risk of major surgery, major complications to be balanced. The surgery results are less in severe endometriosis, but we have to go for a surgery. Otherwise, IVF is preferred to the second surgery. Direct IVF instead of surgery in selected cases like poor ovarian reserve or previous surgery for endometriosis. Treat hydrosalpinx even before ART. Pre-treatment with GnRH agonist improves the result in IVF. And nowadays, it is more advised before embryo transfer. And thank you for patient here.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. So especially those videos were very good and very nice and really informative. So thank you, Chitan. So there are a couple of questions which are there.
Okay.
So can I take those questions?
Okay, sure.
Yes, sir. So first question is from Dr. Manju Porkavi. The patient is 32 years old and she has an endometrioma of 4 into 5 centimeter. She had 2 IUI cycles and they were failed. There is a complaint on and off. So does this patient require surgery?
I think basically if it is a little old or elderly patients and if the ovarian reserve is less, you can see that if you have done 2 ovarian stimulation for IUI, if the ovarian reserve is less, in those patients, definitely what we can do is that we have to see an ovarian reserve in those patients, do AMH, and the ovarian reserve is less, definitely we have to go for an ART in those patients. If you can retrieve usage from the other ovary. But if the ovarian reserve is good, if the previous response were good, definitely you can go for an laparoscopy, relieve the, do the cystomal enucleation, do the adhesiolisis, and try in those patients because that will be the permanent cure. And if the patient has not done previous surgery, ovarian reserve is good, definitely we can go for an hysterolaparoscopy in that patient.
Right, sir. So the treatment management based on the ovarian reserve. So accordingly, it will differ.
Yes.
So next question is.
Our purpose is to achieve pregnancy. So the ovarian reserve is less if you are, don't go for a heroic repeat surgery, where at the end, if the ovarian function is compromised, if you cannot retrieve good oocytes, there is no use in that. Our purpose is with infertility, we have to give a child to the
So right, sir. Thank you. So next question is from Dr. Jayashree. After surgical evacuation of endometriosis or endometriotic cysts, in case of severe endometriosis, when should GnRH agonist be started? So what should be the gap?
The thing is that if the patient is having infertility and if you had done a good adhesiolisis, that's what I told endometriotic fertility score. I put it just to highlight at the end of the surgery, if you can predict good pregnancy outcome with normally or with ovulation induction with IUI, definitely there is no role for GnRH agonist. We have to tell them to try for pregnancy at the end of the surgery. It's from the end of the surgery itself. But if the adhesiolisis is not good or if there is dense adhesion, and then if you are going for an IVF patient, then immediately we can give the GnRH agonist. We can start the next day of the surgery within 1 week and plan for the IVF in those patients. But if you can do a proper adhesiolisis, definitely there is no role for GnRH agonist in the patient with endometriosis with infertility.
Right, sir. Thank you. So next question is from Dr. Sumita Lakshmi. This is a 25-year-old patient. Had her endometrioma excision around 6 months back, and she is presented with a recurrence, and her other ovary is also affected, showing the endometrioma less than 5 centimeter, and her AMH level is 4. Then what should be done with this patient? How to manage?
Definitely, I mean, the success rate of repeat surgery is very less, especially in a patient who is recurring with a huge endometrioma within 6 months. But if the previous surgery, even if it is first surgery is done, if it is not done properly, that means if it is not done by a skilled laparoscopy surgery with a reasonably good ovarian reserve, then we can attempt a second surgery. Otherwise, if it's done properly, the first surgery, and it is again recurring within 6 months, even if it is a young patient, better to go for an ART in the endometriosis with infertility.
Right, so thank you. So again, the next question is from Dr. Sumita Lakshmi. The question is, in case of hydrosalpinx, how to diagnose mild to moderate cases, and how to confirm if proximal occlusion or salpingectomy will help?
Definitely, to confirm the diagnosis, if you are suspecting hydrosalpinx in the scan, first of all, we have to know that hydrosalpinx detectable in the ultrasound only has to be tackled. Otherwise, if you are accidentally seeing in the during laparoscopy, that is different thing. Then in that case, we may not have taken a consent to tackle that. We cannot tackle that. But otherwise, if you are anticipating those will be the hydrosalpinx which has been detectable in the ultrasound. In those cases, sometimes we will be confused whether it is a hydrosalpinx or the collection, I mean pelvic collection. In those cases, we can do a saline sonosalpingograph and see the fluid which you are installing into the uterine cavities go through the hydrosalpinx. That means it is connected to the uterine gate. In those patients, definitely we have to tackle that. While tackling the hydrosalpinx, the best is to go for a proximal tubal ligation than salpingectomy. When you go for a salpingectomy, definitely all the studies has found that it will affect the ovarian reserve to some extent. So infertile patients with hydrosalpinx, definitely we have to go for a proximal tubal ligation. But if the hydrosalpinx is too big, even if you are going for an ART procedure, that will affect the ovum pickup, because that fluid can accidentally go into the mix with that when we aspirate those. In those patients, we can go for a spontaneous salpingostomy also, so that we are not, I mean, interfering with the vasculature to the ovary. As you all know, when you do the salpingectomy, the big hydrosalpinx, definitely it will affect the ovarian vasculature also. So I think that was clear from my presentation. That doesn't need any doubt in that. Infertility with hydrosalpinx, if we are doubt, we can go for an saline sonosalpingograph. If it is connected, we have to definitely go for an proximal tubal clipping.
Right, so thank you, sir. So how many patients are there when it comes to ART treatment, problems with endometriosis in your clinic or generally?
In Kerala, I don't know about the other places, but Kerala, the endometriosis incidence is quite high. Some people tell that it is attributed to the eating habit or the climate here, or due to the heating, food habits. But what we see is that endometriosis incidence is nearly 20% of the infertile patients. What we see, some sort of endometriosis. When you do the surgery for laparoscopy, we can that is what the incidence what we see. Compared to without this laparoscopy, we cannot do that. But from one study, what we did 2 years back, over all the laparoscopy procedures, it was incidences between 20 to 22% with some sort of endometriosis.
Right, sir. Thank you. So one more question is there, though it is not exactly endometriosis, it is the adolescent PCO patient, where the drug of choice has been questioned and the role of Dynogest has been requested.
I mean, why Dynogest has been Dynogest is for endometriosis. Adolescent PCO. Oh, no, both are separate questions. One is adolescent PCOS.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Adolescent PCOS means in those cases, as far as if there is obesity is there. As far as I will first advise the for a changing lifestyle or diet changes and exercises will be the first line. Still, patients is very much apprehensive about irregular periods. Give low dose OC pills for few cycles, 3 cycles, and then tell them to wash up. But definitely, lifestyle modification must be the first line. And coming to the Dynogest, Dynogest definitely most of the studies has been found to be better in preventing the progress of the endometriosis. But infertile patients, there is no role for Dynogest. So Dynogest is very effective if you are not as a part of infertility. I think that's a new drug which came a few years back. So longer studies has to be needed before we can widely use it. Only few studies has been there of use of Dynogest of more than 1 year. Is only few studies are there.
Right, sir. Thank you. So, is there any specific management for adolescent endometriosis?
Adolescent endometriosis must be mainly symptomatic. You can give oral contraceptive pills. One chart I showed about the oral contraceptive pills. Either you can use the progesterone. Even the adolescent age group, we try to avoid the surgery, but in some cases, if there is severe symptoms are there, we may have to go for the surgery. But always we must be careful about the preserving the ovarian function or in this patient, because adolescence must, if you do, however we do it, as I told, it can reform. So symptomatic relief has to be done. But adolescent period, if the patient is not married, we must not we must try to avoid surgery and go for medical management in those patients, because when we do for primary surgery, it's okay, but re-addition formation, plain no cleavage will be difficult. The re-addition formation will be always severe. So that has to be in mind when we are tackling with the adolescent endometriosis. Secondly, when we are tackling with endometriosis, we must if the adolescent girls are there, we must tell about what the actual disease is, what is the importance of how far it will affect the fertility of that girl will be affected. We must counsel them, and according to that, case by case, we have to tackle the adolescent endometriosis.
Right, sir. Thank you for a very informative session. So there are a lot of comments from the doctors, from the audiences, that the session was excellent and everybody is happy. So thank you very much. Thank you for this excellent talk, sir.
Okay.
So we are completing this session. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, doctor.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I hope if you have any doubt, you can contact in my email, because as we are allotted only 1 hour, we have completed that. And PesiLuis@gmail.com you can contact. So I can be always very helpful in clearing the doubt. Thank you for patient hearing, and thank you, Shield, for giving the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Yes, we'll share your email ID as well in case doctors have additional questions. And it was our pleasure and privilege to have you on this platform. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.